Okay. Am I on? You can hear me? Okay. All right. Cool. Hi. Thanks for coming today. My name is James Cooper, and I'm the Director of Instructional Technology and Media Services at Seattle University School of Law, and I'm co-presenting with Evan Lenz today, but really I'm introducing him because he is the one with the brains and the experience behind our own homegrown CMS. What I really want to talk about is kind of how we got to the point of realizing that we needed one. And so I'm going to give you a little historical overview of our websites and the different things that we use to communicate with students and people in the community at the law school. Way back, 7 years ago, the school created a website. The librarians actually created it. And it was basically, you know, the old school brochure. It had a picture, it had some text, it had an email link. And these were the things that were pretty standard because, frankly, it was just cool that we had a website at all at that point. Design and redesign at the time seemed to be based more on the actual skills or tastes of the person with the HTML coding ability than any of the end user's actual needs. And this is the earliest version of the site, quite simple, a major overhaul right there to red. And then a few years later, it actually started to look a little more modern in its design. So at this time, there really wasn't any content management as we might think of it today. In 2001, the school, or is it 2000? In 2000, the school decided that it really wanted to focus on the web and use it as a better tool for communicating with potential students, with potential faculty members, alums, the community, etc. And it was recognized that the method that was being used was just not acceptable. Sort of ad hoc, tossing together HTML pages, maybe a couple different authors for different pages, and it wasn't very consistent. And we recognized, of course, we needed to pull content from design. So the interim solution was ASP and include files. You know, that's the same thing as separating content from design, right? Which sort of was, but in the end there was still a lot of content formatting left back in the include files the way we had done it then. Quick 3-month turnaround gave us a site that looked more like this, that mirrored the campus's site a little more at the time. To complicate things more, we added yet another way of communicating with students and guests, and we have these 50-inch plasma screens in the building that people can interact with. And these are meant to push information instead of having to go and retrieve it from a website or an email box. It's right there, it's in your face. And our requirements, as we thought about it, would be that you would interact with it, that would drive you to it. We would lighten the load on our students' email boxes. They had some pretty clever inbox rules set up, so they never saw any of the stuff from any of the deans. And we wanted to involve people by, again, flashing this information in front of them. And then, of course, the requirement was that the information owners, the actual directors or deans, had an easy way to get in and create content without having to know any HTML technology, and then it would get out there right away without involving the IT department in the editing process. And that is a desktop version of the docket. And Evan will talk about some of this stuff a little bit more. But one thing I'll mention here is, again, as we talk about content, we've got HTML on the web, ASP pages out there. Now we've got a Flash front end that we're dealing with and content behind it. So it's starting to get kind of complicated. So what was the result? Well, we had content mismanagement at that point. We have inefficient and unreliable reuse of content. It gets touched so many times. It gets turned into HTML. It then gets posted to the docket touchscreens that you saw, and then it gets put into an email. We're trying to avoid email, but it goes out again as a redundant message. And then months later, it gets pulled back out and touched again and put into a print journal. And you know what happens that it gets manipulated so many times that people are involved, and we know that people tend to make mistakes. So the content was unreliable. So what do? We redesigned the website again. Well, this gave us an opportunity to look at content overall and how we wanted to handle true separation and reuse of content. And while design was a major factor, we realized that the words were king if we were trying to bring in modern students and new faculty members, and that the website really had to deliver. So content management was a key part of the site redesign at that time, and that we knew we wanted to be able to create a multi-format site, something that was Flash if we wanted Flash, something that was straight HTML for those who didn't want it, and the ability to have a straight text site without having to have multiple sets of content files out there. And that the content would end up getting used across the board with the docket or maybe into a journal that went out later on. And we knew XML would fix it. And how did we know that? We knew because everyone was talking about it. And we knew because we'd heard of it. We knew because most of us, could spell it, but none of us really knew how to work with it. And it's no shock when you sort of come across it the first time that you're just like, geez, we need to talk to someone that knows what they're talking about. So we really realized that we needed to bring in someone with expertise that had some experience with CMS, with XML, and was versed in the standards and even the marketplace with what products were able to help us do it. And yeah, most importantly, could communicate with us, the tech department. Our feeble-minded brains didn't quite get it. We had no idea what we were looking at. And the hire was well worth it. The hiring allowed us to have that direct in-house support, someone that uniquely was tuned into what we were doing, what was changing, things we couldn't even communicate, things we didn't recognize were an important part of the puzzle with coming up with a content management solution. And he pointed out that our inexperience really just outweighed our naivete on how complicated things were. And Evan continues to do that by sending me simple little diagrams, such as this one, as to how things work. And so that brought us to the point in 2002, yes, where we really sat down and looked at a full-time position and a permanent solution. And that's where we are now. And Mr. Lenz will go on to the next part unless there's any questions at this point. That must have been good. There you go, sir. Pepsi? Oh, the microphone.
I have to apologize ahead of time. I've probably taken trying to cover too many things in a short amount of time, but it will be fairly technical, but I do promise some pretty colors along the way. So this is the basic outline of what I'll be talking about. The requirements that we developed last summer when we were talking about initially doing the website, and the overall architecture of the resulting website that was launched in November of last year. Then I'll be talking about briefly introducing Cocoon and how it helps us to meet those goals. And I'll also briefly be looking into the custom content management system that we developed in the law school called Red Hawk. And finally, talking about Xslt briefly. It was mandated that the new website have a Flash-based or Flash-enhanced version, but that it also have an HTML version and an accessible version, and that we didn't know at the time whether that meant 2 or 3 versions. It ended up being 3 versions of the site. We're still aiming for accessibility, but we have the groundwork in place for one of the versions of our site being accessible, and the resulting versions of the site are basically dubbed Flash Standard and text only. We knew that it had to be based on XML to support separation of presentation and content, so that single source of content would be used to generate multiple output formats, allow multiple publishing channels, and continued. We also needed to allow an average web developer that we had to be able to author new content, edit existing content, and integrate with existing tools such as Dreamweaver. And we also knew that particular kinds of content should be converted into custom XML vocabularies, particularly content that has predictable or repeating structure. And we also needed search. This is an overall depiction, it's kind of a lot to read, of the website publishing process that we have now, and briefly covers how the website how the website runs. Most of the pages on our site are static, and they're stored as XHTML, stored in Microsoft Visual Source Safe. And we took the approach of going with Xhtml, which is basically just HTML that conforms to the more tighter syntax constraints of XML, because most of our pages, it was just a simpler approach to take, and it was more incremental approach to migrating into more custom XML content. The way that we build the site is using a product called Apache Ant. And Ant is a Java-based software build framework that uses an XML configuration file, and we use that to build each of the static pages of the site using custom navigation and sidebar XML configuration files, which I'll be showing to you. Cocoon is the workhorse of our site. It provides all the Xslt transformations for dynamic pages, serving dynamic content, while the rest of the static pages are served directly from Apache to enable good performance and minimize load. Examples of dynamic content that Cocoon serves include specialized content that we grab in XML from Red Hawk or Custom CMS, which we'll talk about some more. Google search results, again using XML web services, using Google appliance that the main campus CLU purchased. And also integration of legacy ASP pages that we had already had in the existing site. We didn't want to have to rewrite all of the logic of those forms and database access pages. At this point, we do not have a traditional web content management system that allows end users to edit any page of the site in a WYSIWYG manner, but we are not. It's not terribly necessary at this point. We are chipping away at the webmaster bottleneck by not only separating presentation from content and making a solid website architecture, but also by incrementally adding new XML document types and moving certain kinds of content over to dynamic management. And Red Hawk does enable WYSIWYG editing of content by end users, which I'll show a little bit. Some of the benefits of XML, of using XML, include as I said, separation of presentation and content, which eliminates layout errors, and it enables publication to multiple channels and content reuse. And just to show a quick example of that, you can see an example of how we store the content of our site in Xhtml. This is a very simple page. This is how it would be stored in VSS, and it's very simple, as you can see. But when instantiated into our site, it ends up looking like this, putting into the template of the site. Now this is one of the 3 versions of the site called the standard version, but these buttons here allow you to switch versions of the site. And when you first come to the site, you basically choose the version that you want to see. There's a Flash version which looks very much like this. Oh, great. Oh, that might have. I need that. Okay, that's right. I assume there is a place to plug this in, right? Ethernet? Yeah? Okay, cool. Well, I might just skip that for now, until it gives me an IP address. Okay, that's better. So this is the standard version of the site. We have DHTML navigation at the top, and this is all generated using a single XML configuration file for navigation. This site is mirrored very closely in the Flash version of the site. Just a little flashier. We have some nice animation going on. This navigation, again, is generated from the same source. We'll see an example of navigation.xml, the basic configuration file for that. And in this case, the navigation.xml is actually being output more or less directly to the Flash file, which is able to support XML and generate this menu on the fly. Whereas the standard version uses a DHTML script that takes a JavaScript array that is also generated from that XML. And then the text-only site has a different navigation scheme, but again, the navigation is based on that single navigation.xml file. These are the top-level sections, and the submenus are shown below in nested lists of links. Okay. It's better. And just recapping some of the primary tools, we use Apache Cocoon. We use the Apache web server on Linux to serve most of the static pages. And we use mod rewrite, which is a plugin to Apache that allows us to rewrite URLs as they're requested so that we can serve, for example, static file path.html when the request was actually for path !mode = flash, which is the way that we determine what version of the site the given request is asking for. We integrate with the Google appliance using XML and Xslt, which is the transformation language for XML. We integrate with legacy ASP scripts. We use a open source framework for XML and RDF processing called ForSuite, which is what our custom Red Hawk content management system is based on. These are the tools that are running as you're using the site. And behind the scenes, when we publish at any given time, we're using Microsoft Visual Source Safe for versioning. We can enable rollbacks of content in case we do end up making mistakes. We use Samba, which allows us to mount a shadow folder on a Linux box so that we can stage the site and make sure everything looks okay before publishing it. We use Dreamweaver MX, which includes XHTML support, so that all the content conforms to the rules of XML, so that it plugs into the site without breaking. And Dreamweaver also supports Visual Source Safe integration, which is very nice. Again, we use Apache Ant to actually do the work of building the static pages of the site. And again, behind the scenes, ForSuite is actually being used behind the firewall as the basis for Red Hawk. Introduction to Cocoon. Cocoon is an XML-based web publishing framework from the Apache project. And one of its fundamental purposes is to enable the separation of concerns between content, logic, and style. And this little diagram, which I grabbed off the site, nicely shows the minimization of contracts that need to be present to enable the separation of concerns. Notice that logic, which would be people like database, backend developers, and style, the graphic design people, there's no contracts linking these two because of the XML-based. They agree on the XML format to begin with, which is free of logic and free of style. It's just content, simplistically. And so this ensures that graphic designers won't have to be stumbling over scripting code and vice versa. The Cocoon Sitemap is an XML configuration file that determines the central point of configuration for Cocoon, and it allows you to map URIs, request URIs, to behavior and how the page is to be assembled. For example, this short example says, when a request comes in for this URI, generate XML by making an HTTP request, in this case, to Red Hawk CMS, transform it using this Xslt style sheet, and then serialize it as XHTML. This is another sitemap excerpt from our actual Cocoon sitemap, and it kind of starts to show what kinds of power you have in the Cocoon sitemap as far as conditional logic goes. And I actually extended this. This keeps going for a while, but I've summarized it again in the slide that James was making fun of earlier. So this is the flowchart showing what happens when anyone makes a request to any given page of the site in our template. It doesn't include requests for images or other static PDFs, static files. And in fact, this actually shows what Cocoon does when it gets a request dispatched to it from Apache. But Apache handles the bulk of the requests, so that Cocoon only handles requests for dynamic pages. And this shows how Cocoon can determine which version of the site you want based on the presence of the the mode parameter, and if it's Flash, then generate the Flash version of the page, standard, generate the standard version of the page, simple. And if the mode parameter is not present, which we want to be able to support because we want the same consistent URIs across the site without having to have it messed up, dirtied up with a mode parameter, then we check the value of the cookie that's been set in the browser. So, for example, if I go onto the site and say I just want to go to technology department, I don't need to type in mode equals simple or anything, but it will take me to the version of the site that I had chosen previously based on the value of my cookie, and it just redirects me to that page. Okay. I put a lot of thought into the design of URIs when we redesigned the site, and was inspired actually by an essay that Tim Berners-Lee wrote in 1998 called "Cool URIs Don't Change." And I took particularly two of his suggestions to heart, leaving out file extensions from URLs, such as .html, and also leaving out topic or classification by subject, which is a little more difficult to define. Cocoon makes it really easy to map external URIs to internal file names, or server page scripts, or HTTP requests. There's lots of different ways that that can happen. You have complete flexibility. So that wasn't a problem. The other challenge of trying to leave out the topic or classification by subject was more difficult, and I had to just decide what that really meant. And I came up with a maxim to decouple navigational structure from URI structure. Most sites, the URIs in most sites correspond directly to the navigational structure of that site. So for example, you have sections within a given site. Those sections are usually reflected in the path of the URI. So that if you go up one directory, you're actually going up one to the section above that contains a given section. But the problem with this is that if you need to move pages around to different sections, especially after you launch the site and people are coming, you saying, no, this page doesn't go there, it goes over there, and telling you to move everything around, then you've got problems because you have to update lots of links, you have to move files around, and it's very error prone. But we found a way by using a configuration file navigation.xml to treat these two hierarchies of URIs and navigational structure as independent. And this XML file, an excerpt of which we see here, maps the sections of the site and the pages within those sections to particular URIs. So we see the menu element corresponds to the welcome section of the site, and each link element within that corresponds to a particular URI. And notice that it doesn't say welcome in front of everyone. One of them happens to be welcome, but just because the page made sense to call it welcome, not because it was in the welcome section. That, in principle, could be moved to any other section just by cutting and pasting and putting it down here. It would move to another section of the site automatically. And we can see when we look at the site, I'll switch back to the Flash version, how these links correspond to the items in this menu, for example. We have submenus and third-level submenus as well. And I started going to this earlier, the benefits of treating these two hierarchies as independent. Pretty much covered it. Okay. We also use an XML-based configuration file for the sidebar on our site, which is shown here. I think I'll go to the faculty section. Here's an example. Each section of the site has a unique configuration of sidebar items. These are various kinds of items, such as faculty profiles, quotes, or promotions, various sorts. And this is the faculty section of the site. And so all the pages within the faculty section of the site will have this sidebar configuration. And shown right here. The buttons are declared up here in reference within each section of the file. So we declare that we want these buttons in that order for the faculty sidebar. And so profile corresponds to the first video button here, which is a nice embedded video. And quote corresponds to this quote right here. And the three promotions, as you can see, correspond to these three items. Okay. Running out of time. Red Hawk is what we use to create, update, delete announcements and events for the docket, which James started talking about earlier. And we're also extending it to be used for other kinds of content. In particular, we have a project by the Access to Justice Institute for managing Hague Convention-related case information. And we developed an XML document type for Hague cases. And we support WYSIWYG editing of that content. So we've already had some student editors come in and enter 11 cases or so. And this allows us to slate certain parts of our website, slate content for certain parts of our website that can be edited and updated by average end users. Right now we're using an XML editor, browser-based XML editor from Altova. It's actually free. They released it for free, called Authentic. And in the future we plan to support the new XML features in Word 2003 and InfoPath, which is another XML form-based editor. Here's an example of a form for adding announcements, which would go up on the docket. Xslt is the workhorse of pretty much everything I do. So it's used throughout our projects. Cocoon, Xslt is the default type of transformer. It transforms the pages as they're being built. And uses Xslt to build all the static pages of the site. It's built into 4Suite, and it's used to generate pages from Red Hawk for use in Cocoon and integration into the website. It's used by the Google appliance to style the output of search results. And there's one of the biggest advantages of Xslt at this point, in comparison to other templating technologies, is its widespread support, implementation, and platform independence. It is being supported, and there are good implementations in .NET, in J2EE, in Perl, Python, PHP, whatever kind of web environment you're interested in. Xslt is, at this point, is pretty much a good option. And it's also supported in Internet Explorer 6 and Mozilla. And it also has pervasive usage within Microsoft Office 2003 as a way of developing custom editing solutions. We look forward to using those things. So, sorry. Any questions? Go ahead. Good question. It's not terribly easy. It's Java-based, so you've already got the whole JVM requirements. You have to make sure your JVM is set up. You have to make sure your environment variables are set up. But the Cocoon documentation is very extensive, and I didn't have a problem just by consulting the Cocoon documentation. And I haven't had to tweak it at its core very much at all since launching the site. So, go ahead.
You had mentioned an XML editor. Have you found one that is probably a little more user-friendly than the other ones? You mentioned Altova Authentic.
Yeah, Authentic. Authentic is nice. It supports mixed content where you can have like formatted text. So it's not just a text box, but it actually can have bold and italic, things like that. It still doesn't it doesn't behave like Microsoft Word. So it's still a little dicey when it comes to usability. So far, that's the only real experience that I've had. I've tried out a bunch of other editors, and I just have had to put most of the time in the one that I chose. But I really am looking forward to being able to use some of the Microsoft products as they come out. People are people are used to using Word, and in Word 2003 Professional, you'll be able to actually use it as an XML editor for your custom document type. So, go ahead.
Since Java barely unbundled the Internet Explorer, do you have any concerns about the kind of reliance on it?
No, we're not relying. We don't rely at all on Java being in the browser. Java's used on the server, and that's all. So there's no real issues there actually. So.
Can you recommend a particular PHP-based solution or a this kind of thing?
Well, there's sort of a plethora of web content management things out there. I don't have a particular recommendation. I obviously prefer things that are more XML based. So, go ahead.
What was your reason for developing yourself versus going with
Number of reasons. For one thing, cost. But more importantly, the enterprise content management, a lot of the content management frameworks both provide too many features that I don't need, and they don't provide enough. They don't provide the kind of flexibility that I need. The kinds of requirements that we had for the website, 3 different versions, and the behavior that we wanted, where the URIs would be the same, and we could send out URIs, and people would go there and just get the version that they had chosen. All these various aspects kind of required that we develop, at least to some extent, custom solutions. And yeah, basically, it was feasible to do so ourselves, and we knew that we could meet our requirements exactly by developing it in-house. So.
How much money is invested in the publishing system?
You mean like software licenses? Well, it costs $40 for the DHTML script. Microsoft Visual Source Safe, we have a couple users, so that's an investment there, not a very big investment. Beyond that, we have pretty much all open source tools that are freely available that we're using. So.
You're also using Seattle, correct? You get Linux free.
Nope. You get Linux free wherever you live, so. Yeah. Go ahead.
What operating system you're running or attaching Cocoon application?
We have both our staging server and our production server on Red Hat Linux. But we, of course, VSS, Visual Source Safe, is running on a Windows 2000 server. And of course, the clients we're using, Dreamweaver, running on Windows.
Your cookie system where you go back and get the page you want, how does that work? You select text on the site, and remember next time you select text, and if you change your mind, you click HTML, and you leave the site, and it's kind of HTML.
Right. Yeah, and it actually has a graceful fallback if you don't have cookies enabled. What happens is we'd actually recommend you saving in your favorites once you go to the site a version that you want. But if you don't, if you just go to the site, each time you will be asked which version you want. But once you're in the site, all of the embedded URLs of pages have hard-coded mode equals flash, for example, and so you stay within the site. And that also means that Cocoon doesn't have to worry about it. Basically, once they get past that entry point, unless it's a dynamic page, Apache takes care of the rest, because all of the URLs are dynamically rewritten. But also, we actually have 4 versions of the site, because one version is meant specifically for crawlers, for search engines. So we have use of the Google appliance. And if you actually do a web search on our site, if you get Google search results, you won't ever see mode equals flash, mode equals standard, anything like that in the search results. You will see just the pristine URI. When you click on the link, it actually has mode equals flash behind the scenes, so you stay within the site. But that enables us to support Google search along each version of the site. So. Mm-hmm.
Just out of curiosity, the graphic work that was done on it, wonderful.
Yeah.
Outsourced?
No, in-house.
It's right here.
It's not, I mean, a lot of it. Recently, because
Well, that's been one of the highlights of my job, actually, working with Michael. So, yeah, he's sitting right here.
Very nice. You guys definitely can't, but you guys take a look at this site. It's very well done.
Thank you.
All right. My name is Ben Chapman, and I'm the Director of Computing Resources at the University of Tulsa for a few more days. And then I'm moving to Emory Law School. I am sometimes associated with the Linux Fringe group that works around and in and among us. But today what I'm going to do is take a little bit of a different approach. Last year I gave a talk about Zope. I love David Dickens. See, I didn't have the nerve to yelp during his security thing, but I wanted to. Anyway, last year I gave a talk about Zope. It seemed to be well received. 2 people followed up with email. All right. This year we're not going to do that. There are going to be a lot of you. And you're going to follow up with email. And the reason you're going to follow up with email to me about this is because I'm not going to use Linux. Okay? How many people use Windows every day as their day-to-day computing environment? Okay, Linux heads. How many Linux users day-to-day, it's your solid machine, raise your hands high, be proud. And then the most beautiful Unix on the planet, Mac OS X. All right. Okay, and that's, yes, it is. It's gorgeous. So I think it makes sense to focus on Windows. Now, I couldn't help myself. I did actually do the slideshow in OpenOffice. But my goal today is to get you guys to take a look at Zope. If you want to see what we did with Zope, go look at my presentation last year. Or go look at www.law.utulsa.edu. What I want you to do is I want you to take a look at Zope. Also, I want you to take my job, by the way. Steal my job. I promised the dean that I would mention we're hiring. University of Tulsa, go find the job posting. Okay, Zope's free, it's open source, it's great, it's fabulous, it's object-oriented, it uses all of the best buzzwords. Maybe a picture would help. I don't have a picture that's as good as the Apache Cocoon picture, but this is a pretty good picture. I think it's sufficiently confusing. The main thing to know about Zope is it serves up content in a number of different ways. HTTP, FTP, WebDAV, other groovy stuff. It keeps everything in an object-oriented, actually DB-based database. Within it, it has connections to relational databases. It has other connections to the file system in case you've got 600 megs of stuff, say real video files, that you'd rather not keep inside your beautiful managed database. To simplify, object-oriented, it's a web application server. What Zope really is neat for is that it comes ready-made with a through-the-web content management interface that doesn't suck. Okay? It is not awful. Okay? Some of you will go to it and you'll go, oh. Okay? Well, it's really not bad, and we're going to play with it. We're going to play with it in just a minute. Now, when you think about really not bad, those of you who spend all of your time designing interfaces for end users know how hard it is to design one that doesn't suck. The fact that they have taken care of that for you, even if it's not the best thing you've ever seen, is pretty neat and should not be underestimated. And of course, the great thing is it runs on Windows for testing. Go download it now. Okay, HTTP. Whack, whatever, www.zope.org. See, Win32. It's got a little installer. It's very nice. Oh, Here's another slide. Go download it now. Okay. What do you get when you get Zope? You get a prepackaged Python interpreter. Python is a nice scripting language. If you're not a programmer by trade, if you get tired of typing very long Java identifiers, Python is a lot of fun. It's a neat language. We get some other stuff. We go on, we start up Zope. There's, by the way, and again, I am orienting this towards you Windows users who are going to go download this and run it. Click, click, click. It is a 6 meg download. Okay, even over wireless, it's already downloaded. Okay, choose to start it manually. The reason I say choose to start it manually, it will offer to start as a service. And that's just in general a bad thing, and so don't. Tell it you want to start manually. Here is the one little area where they don't completely hold your hand in the Windows version. You've got to do some navigating. Go find, this is a MS-DOS batch file called start.bat or start.cmd. I don't know, because this OS hides the extensions of things. And make a copy of it and put it on your desktop. Then start it up. And you're going to see another window. I was telling David Dickens that I was so excited because I was using a slideshow to show a console window. Okay, it will fire up something on port 8080 on whatever computer you happen to be connected to. It's amazing that months ago when I was working on this presentation, I knew I'd be connected to the Duke network. Your first success event. Check on your server by going out to the loopback interface and port 8080. Tack manage on the end. This is a core concept with Zope. You tack manage on the end, and assuming you've got the proper credentials, you are in the through the web management interface. Add a manager user. Okay. Once you've done that, it's time to start reading. Zope is free. It's open source. It's good stuff. It's been around now for 4 years. The Python community, by the way, is a friendly community. It is different than the Perl community. There's no such thing as obfuscated Python. And anyway, it's a good community. It's a good group. The thing that I recommend that you do, a fellow who runs a Zope hosting service has actually put together a PDF version of the latest edition of the Zope book, which is a little bit hard to find on the Zope site. So go to this URL. I'll email this to Elmer. It'll be up on the web. But go to this URL, grab this PDF file. Your browser will probably decompress the file on the fly, and you'll be able to deal with it. In this OS, it will not remove the second file extension, but it will decompress it. So you'll have to rename it. Other resources, run a search for Zope on Amazon. There's a particular book, which I mentioned last year, which is still excellent. Steve Spickelmeyer and a group of other folks wrote a book called Web Application Development and Content Management using Zope. It's really good. I've never used the Zope Bible. Other people like it. The mailing lists, go subscribe to the mailing list. If you want a sense of how Python gets used, by the way, Mailman, which is rapidly becoming a fairly popular mailing list manager, is Python-based. And Zope owns Python Labs. They own, Guido van Rossum and his group who created Python now are employees of Zope Corporation. Okay, now we're going to use our little Zope. We're going to play with it for a little bit. Remember, I showed you there was a window that was going to open up. This console window, if you close this console window, you will shut down your little play Zope. So don't do that. But I did want to show you that that's going to be up there for you. Oh, and this is the Zope book. Lest you think this is the traditional PHP nuke, 20 pages of documentation, and we're really moving forward. The book is 450 pages long. It's actually well written. The first version was not. This one is much, much, much better. One of the things they benefited from is an online comment system, paragraph by paragraph. Users comment on new drafts of the manuscript, and it makes for a better version of the manuscript. If you go to a hard copy bookstore and buy the Zope book, you'll get the last version. It was oriented towards Zope 2.4, which is not what you want. You actually do want the 2.6 because of some changes in the internals of Zope. Now, let's go find a browser window. Oh, by the way, I thought I had arrived. Tom Bruce saw me today, and he said, you know, you look just like, you know, this guy. I'm like, oh, okay, I better go look that up, right? So I went and looked the guy up. Okay. It's the guy over there. This guy. It's a very sophisticated, dry New York sense of humor, I think, at work there. Anyway, this is our little baby Zope, okay? This is our little baby Zope running on this laptop. Yes, sir?
Any prizes for the person to get it downloaded and running first?
Yes, sir. How'd it work? Fantastic. Now you come up and finish. Now, I got to tell you, I mean, Cacoon is really cool stuff. And what we're aiming for, like I say, is playing with content management. You know, playing, but you will not get a Cacoon box up that fast. Fantastic. Thanks, David. Yeah, they can. Again, take my job. We'll pay you money. Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's beautiful. It's not a desert. Okay. We are now within this content management screen. Here's the thing. A lot of users can actually deal with this. This is not bad. Okay? It may not be perfect for us, but it's not bad. Traditional sort of folders on the left, stuff on the right. Okay? Objects on the right. Now these objects, we get a menu of additional objects we can add, all sorts of fun stuff we can add in. We don't care about that much right this minute. What I want to show you is what you can do with some very basic objects on the little baby Zope that you just created. The very first thing I did is I created a new folder called My Folder, and I did it by going here, selecting Folder, clicking Add. Click on My Folder, and what you see in here are this little group of components that are going to make up a page when someone goes to 127.001.8080/My Folder. This is a key concept with Zope, as it is with any object-oriented content management system. Everything that comes off that server is cooked. It's put together out of components that are built into the resulting object that you see. And if you do a search, you'll find these discussions about baked versus cooked and some other stuff, which has to do with whether or not you create these objects in real time or not. But for now, that's what we're doing. We are creating an object or a page for the end user. When they go to My Folder /, they're going to get something built out of this thing, which we're going to look at, called index_HTML, standard HTML footer, and standard HTML header. We have kind of an idea of what these things might do, right? And this is from SSI, from basic templating concepts from years ago. You have an idea of what this might do. If we look inside index_HTML, we're going to see something written in Zope's templating language called DTML, which I forget what it stands for. Document Template Markup Language. DTML var looks like a variable. It is a variable. Substitutes the contents of standard HTML header and thump them into here. DTML var title or ID. If this object has a title, put the title in. If the object does not have a title, put in index_HTML, which happens to be the ID of this document. And in fact, if we view this inside our little management screen, we see my test folder and all the text that's in it. Let's go back. Once we get beyond that, all we see is pretty much plain text until we get down to the bottom, DTML var standard HTML footer. So far, so good, and there is nothing different here than what you've been seeing for years in any basic content management system. The difference becomes apparent when you have to manage 6 levels of folders, when you have to manage hundreds of pages. And that has to do with something called acquisition. Okay, acquisition, another object-oriented concept. We acquire behavior from our superclasses, if I've got that right. I was a poli-sci major. We acquire behavior from things higher up in the URL tree. Okay? So what that means is that if I go into, and I didn't show you, by the way, I didn't show you what was in the header, but I bet you already guessed. You know, HTML, head, we got a style type there, so, you know, my poor attempt at a little CSS, and then we launch into the body. That's the header. The footer closes out the page. The way acquisition works, remember, we were up one level. We had an index_HTML that was up one level, and it had a header and a footer, right? As we look in here, look in this folder, there is no header and there is no footer. The way that Zope works, it will traverse the tree until it finds the document that you want. Let me illustrate that. Here's my shell document, index_HTML. I say, go find standard HTML header. Go find standard HTML footer. We don't care where they are. Keep going till you find them or return an error. Okay? Then we've got something a little different. And this is actually the foundation of our content management system at the University of Tulsa. Again, poor man's content management, but it's worked well for us. DTML var content, FMT, well, that looks sort of like an XML attribute or an HTML attribute sort of argument, and it is. Format equals something called structured text. So this document, this object, is being built out of 3 components. A header, which is not there, it's being acquired. Something called content, and something called standard HTML footer. If we go back, we don't want to click on that again. Let's look at content. Okay, content, let me tell you something, just a second. Content looks like email. It's some sort of semi-structured text. A very long line of text headed out that way, and then some stuff here, and some more long text. Let's look at what the cooked version of the page looks like, and then we'll talk about what happened. All right, there was no header and no footer in here. Let me go back. Sure there was. Okay, there was no footer in there. We inherited the footer. We changed the header because I wanted to change the style sheet. And the content that got built in was built in a format using this structured text. Structured text relies exclusively on indentation and simple symbology to indicate what you want. You saw that bulleted list get created. It got created from these space or blank line delimited paragraphs with little stars by it. If I do something like this, I put in a couple of stars, and we go back, and we view the page. Never do, this is the lawyering thing, you know, never do something you don't know the answer to. It should have been bold. I'm sure it was. You all saw that, didn't you? Moving on. I want to mention one other thing. If you happen to like Netscape, there is a very small patch you have to make to the Zope source code to turn on wrap equals soft in form boxes. The way that Internet Explorer works, it will automatically wrap text for you. I'm using Netscape, and that's why the text runs all the way out there. The point being, we have built a site with several hundred pages, and we've built it around this kind of very simple concept where most of the pages, don't look, that's right. Yeah, there were 6. Keep trying. Okay. This is an example of the underlying content, which was put there by the admissions staff. This is the underlying content that created, that built up that page that you all saw. And it makes for some really neat stuff. I want to show one other very quick example. 1 minute. I got 1 minute left. Zope has tons and tons of objects built in. One of the more useful or objects that can be added on. They can be added on even to your trial, your version that you're running in Windows. One of them is called the Tiny Table Plus. The Tiny Table Plus is something you guys will have seen 1,000,000 times before. The pipe delimited file, the comma separated value file, the thing that you built tons and tons of web pages out of. Okay. The nice thing about this is I can actually ask someone to edit that other than me. Okay, it's not beautiful, it's not perfect, and if they screw up and they leave a quote out, they won't get the data back that they want, but I can turn it over to somebody. I can ask someone else to take a look at that. I can also have them upload a file directly or edit it via FTP or edit it via WebDAV. The stuff that I can do with that, with the directory, I'm going to show you some very small, the Zope folks are in the middle of they would like us all to use, good, Ben. They would like us all to use Python for any kind of programming logic, but I'm lazy, and I do it in DTML. And let me show you an index here. First off, I'll give you the view. Okay, again, we've all seen about a gazillion of these, right? Staff directory, there's a name, there's a phone, there's an email. We know it got filled out of that file. So far, so good. The way that it got filled, oh, by the way, here's an alternate version. Let's put it into something that might someday become an XML document, okay? And then let's put it into a classic CSV version so that we can feed it into Excel. The logic involved in doing that, because Python support for lists is very strong, the logic involved in implementing this is trivial. Okay, and here's how we do it. You recognize all the table code, right? DTML in directory. The directory is that tiny table object. So this means iterate over every object within the tiny table object and return a sequence of sequences actually, with name, email, and phone number filled in. Then my variable substitution is DTML var name, DTML var phone, and then I do wrap it with an href and DTML var email. I was looking for the simplest possible, reasonably useful thing that I could do in DTML to show you. The wrapper is the only thing that would change if you wanted to output CSV or something that looks more like, I don't know, WML, XML, whatever it is that you're interested in. But again, my goal today, apart from getting you to apply for my job at the University of Tulsa College of Law, my goal today is to get you to download the software, play with it, and realize that some very large sites are built around Zope, including very large southern research universities get built around Zope. Okay? And that's it. If you've got questions, I'm sorry that I've kept you, but if you've got questions of me or of Evan, fire away, and I'm sure we'll stick around. Thank you.
Hey, what do you do now? Do you stop it? Yeah. Take the file, show me.